Why have I quit my job? Why have I, bought a van? And why am I going to drive around the country? Well, I'm passionate about the idea that you need to be heard. And I want to stitch these stories together across the states. We're going to find the commonalities, and it's going to be really an amazing experience, and I look forward to you joining me on the job. Hey, good morning, everybody. Good evening. I guess depending upon what side of this big, beautiful, spinning blue ball you are resting on, wherever you're planting your feet or hopefully at one point grounding your feet, taking off your shoes and putting your feet on some good old-fashioned soil somewhere and connecting to this Mother Earth. Welcome to Mental Health Today. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Got a great guest lined up, Ernestine Whitman. Ernestine, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were talking offline with Ernestine. I was just telling her I remember seeing her on the queue a while ago and going to your book page and going to Amazon and reading a little bit of the story and just going, oh, this is going to be a great conversation because I'm fascinated with music. I didn't tell you before, Ernestine, but I was a trumpet player as a kid.
Okay.
Played in a lot of concert bands, so I've done a lot of the symphony band. I was in the symphony band in my high school. We had a good, we had a couple hundred people in the band. It was a big high school.
Where was that?
In Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
The north.
A lot of good players in Chicago.
Yeah, the north side of Chicago, a place called the New Trier East. It's one of the better, at least, judged by whatever the scholastic judgments back in the day, one of the better college preparatory high schools, I guess is what you would call it.
I know this because our faculty chamber group went to that high school, and mostly because we knew that they had a good music program. So he must have been a pretty good trumpet player.
I was a number 3 chair. I can say that.
That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Well, I can say that the number 1 chair ended up becoming in the bugle corps for the Marines.
Oh, that's very competitive. Wow.
And that's very competitive. And Jeff, God, I forget his last name's going to slip by, but that guy, he could blow a horn.
Yeah.
Boy, he could play. He could really play. And he was a giant personality as well. So imagining him in that role in the Marine Corps, solid double bullseye, the right guy for the job, But you were the number 1 chair in your high school band, I'm suspecting.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I would have a feeling. And so you retired as a professional flutist?
Yes, I've actually been retired from my job as flute professor at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. So not St. Lawrence, but Lawrence University. And I loved that job. But my first job, which we will get into, was playing in the Atlanta Symphony. And it was the sort of turmoil that I encountered there that kind of drove me away from orchestral playing and made me think about getting a doctorate so I could teach in a college. And that's what I did.
Interesting.
But, for when I was a kid, from 15, I wanted to be an orchestral player because I loved the sound of the strings. And I just wanted to be part of that sound. And then I got my dream job, and then it became a nightmare. But we'll get into that.
What is it like? Because it's quite competitive, and I've played in these. When you do your rehearsals and your performances, it's quite. It's a little bit nerve-wracking. You've got to have some nerves of steel. You have to be good. What is it like auditioning for the Atlantic Symphony Orchestra? That has got to be. Oh, yeah.
Not Atlantic. Atlanta.
I'm sorry, Atlanta. Yeah, the Atlanta.
Right. I have to make that clear because the Atlanta Symphony is, forgive me, quite a bit better than the Atlantic.
Oh, and it's a real. It's a real thing too. Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you've got to be what, 22? Were you
Well,
what's your age? And that's
yeah,
so intimidating.
I was 20, and
Wow.
the audition was not stressful because I didn't think I had a chance. So, I just sort of
Ah,
played and thought nothing of it. And that night, I was in college. That night, I had a dance to go to with
okay.
Cannonball Adderley, and I was really excited about that. But then I got this call late afternoon. Oh, we'd like you to play second flute in the Atlanta Symphony. So then I really didn't care about the dance or the date or Cannonball Adderley. Uh, it was it was a come dream come true until it wasn't. But
Yes.
we'll get into that.
Those are interesting, and they have to be. How many people are in the full orchestra?
Well, it can vary from about 80 to about 95. And then when they do a Mahler or Bruckner symphony that calls for 10 horns, then they
Wo-
hire extras. So it can be a rather large group. I think it was about 92 when I got in 1966. So that definitely dates me for listeners.
Yeah, we can do the math now.
Right, right. Yeah, I was 20 in
In
66.
66. Yeah, 20 and 66 and bright-eyed and going in. And what's the culture? Is it you would get the idea back then it's a tough culture inside those places. Like
It
this is
is,
it's highly competitive.
yes.
Um
And you're expected
yeah.
to be note perfect. And you're expected to be that way from the first rehearsal. So the rehearsals, typically professional orchestras rehearse Monday through Thursday and then have three performances. Often ours were Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. But you have to be perfect for the first rehearsal. So it is pretty stressful. And people think, oh, play in an orchestra, that sounds like fun. Um, it's pretty intense.
It, can you hear how good are your ears when you're in those environments? Because I can remember, can you hear each instrument? How outside of yourself do you get?
Oh, of course. I mean, you have to listen all the time because even just a slight variation in the temperature of the hall can affect your intonation. And you're always tuning to those around you. And I'm talking about cents, that is
Y-
CENTS, not a half pitch, not a quarter tone, but little, tiny little gradations of intonation.
How about the conductor? I mean, maybe a couple different. I have more of a crazy question on the conductor.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just kind of pausing to kind of assemble it. Conductors control the room, right? They listen to everything. They seem like they're doing nothing from
Oh,
the
that's not true.
outside,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, if to the untrained eye, they look like
Yeah.
this
Oh, I can do
maniac,
this.
yeah, some maniacal character waving their arms around, flipping pages, sweating on stuff, standing up there like an ogre over the entire a bunch of professionals who look like they know what they're doing. They don't make sure, do they really need that much help? And at the same time, I draw this analogy to life, and who are they in the real world? And do we have them?
Mm.
Or do we need them? So maybe the
Oh,
first, yeah, the first analogy first. Uh, are they important, and what are they doing up
oh
there?
gosh, they are so important. Um, their expertise is really
Yeah.
in how they rehearse. So what you see at a concert
Ah,
is the product of the four rehearsals. And a
ah,
conductor every so we typically had 2.5 to 3 hour rehearsals,
Okay.
but then on Wednesday, a double rehearsal. And every minute of every rehearsal, he has, or she, there are many
Yeah.
more
Yes.
women
Oh, yeah.
than
Many
there
women
used to
now.
be. And they have to hear everything in the orchestra, which frankly, most musicians at that level do. We
Are
listen
hearing everything.
to everyone in the
Mm.
orchestra. But yeah, no, their expertise is very important, although that's especially true in 19th, 20th, 21st century repertoire.
Yes.
But if you have, late 18th century, yeah, violinists can sort of conduct from their stand, from their
Yes.
violin stand.
Yeah.
But for the pieces that have a lot of changes in tempo, then you really
Mm.
have to have someone controlling the whole group.
Oh, that is interesting. You're right. When the tempo's changing, who do you look to? Who's the leader? Because you do need a leader, otherwise someone's going to take off, and maybe two
Right.
different teams are to the the horns are fighting with the strings to take control over the tempo, right? And who's pushing? And so you have the conductor to kind of bring everybody together, all the disparate parts. Who's the
Yep.
conductor in life? Like in life, what's the analogy to a conductor?
Oh, boy, that's a very deep question. I suppose if you're religious, you would say God, but depending on your religion, you might not
Huh.
think that God has control of everything. Um,
No, the conductor doesn't have control either. It's like a willful thing, right?
that's true, although if you don't follow him, you'll probably lose your job. So,
Ooh, we're circling around that spot, aren't we?
right, right. So the conductor is very crucial. And when I played in Atlanta, I happened to join the year that they were looking for a new conductor.
Okay.
So my first year in the symphony, we were sort of auditioning conductors, but
Okay.
we didn't like anyone. And I don't know if there are any older listeners who might know the name Robert Shaw, but the
I
Robert
think
Shaw Chorale was a big thing mid 20th century.
yes.
And my second year, we hired Robert Shaw. When he got to the orchestra, he fired about a third of the players. We each auditioned separately, one by one. You're
Again.
out. You're
Oh my God, that's so
yeah,
brutal.
yeah. So it was very, very intense. The second, third, fourth, and fifth years that I was in it.
Um, so I think it's good for listeners to know that you've written a book about your life in the Atlanta Orchestra.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
call you on that every
yeah.
time.
Yeah, I could feel. I remember it. I don't know why I want to say Atlantic, but I think it's the coast.
Well, you're not in our country currently,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you're across
and
the Atlantic.
I'm safe away from the storm.
Yeah, that's going to be a bad one. It is a bad one.
Looks to be quite bad.
Yeah.
So you're there. They bring in a new conductor, and how did things change? What is it like? When you've got somebody, because these are really. I mean, in some ways, they've got to be a bit ogreish, I want to say. Like I'm sure there's beautiful conductors, but you've got to be a bit of a monster to control 150 perfectionists. So this has got to attract. Is it only attract a maniacal character, or are there
No,
amazing humans in this role?
amazing humans. That's the one I'd go with.
Yeah.
The ogre, as I said a little bit before we started this, it used to be that conductors could get away with being very autocratic and
Yes.
insulting, and they would make players feel terrible, especially the woodwind and brass players, who their part is one on a part, whereas you can't jump on the third chair cellist as well, because how do you know if they made a mistake. But if the second flute or the first oboe, yeah. So they have to be very critical, but they also have to be
Mm,
inspiring. And
yes.
the
Yeah,
orchestra
yeah.
works the best when a conductor comes in and he just brings, or she brings something really special interpretively to the repertoire that you
Uh,
probably played with a lot of conductors. So in Atlanta, it's interesting. A couple of years ago, I got tired of Wisconsin winters because I've lived in Wisconsin for over 40 years. And I bought a condo with my husband in Atlanta. So I have been to the Atlanta Symphony, which is the orchestra I was in my 20s, very recently, and they have a fantastic woman conductor. This is, I think, her third year, and
okay.
she is terrific. And that's happening more and more. So, yeah, but women can be, I started to say a word I shouldn't say, women can be obnoxious too. So,
Well, that job, that role, almost as you were speaking, I'm like, yeah, actually, women might be. There's some roles, right? Men and women are just different, and we're just suited. We just might be more suited towards. And I would think, in some ways, a conductor's got might be more a job that women might be more suited at. In
I,
that,
I, I don't, I
or
don't
is
think
it,
I
or
agree.
is it more of a guy, a leader, kind of a you need a guy, and not a guy, but is it which one, men or women are more suited for this role
I guess
naturally?
I would just not touch that. I would say that there are fine people on both
On
sides. It's
both sides.
terrible,
Yeah.
terrible put.
Oh yeah.
But men and women, men and women are equally talented, and fortunately, women are getting more chances than they were when I
Yeah.
was on the
Yeah.
scene. But no, I think it takes someone who is obsessed with, getting everything note perfect. So you have to be, but you have to be a little obsessive to be a professional musician anyway. The
Yeah, you
conductor,
have to, for sure, you have to be obsessive, right? Over
yeah.
especially at that level, you have to be a perfectionist.
And unfortunately, these days, conductors have to lure and sort of get the audience really behind them. So they have to do a lot of fundraising, which they
Mm.
didn't used to have to do. And so it's the charisma of a conductor that is very, very helpful in getting people to support the symphony.
You've got to have so you've got to have that. You've got to have the. I mean, you have to have the technical ability. Boy, these are really freaks of nature.
Well, they're people who practice 10,000 hours.
Also a freak of nature, right? I mean, like, but you've got to have charisma. You have to have this desire. You start adding up all the attributes that you need to have to be at that level. And how many people are there that want? There's 100 and up to 150 musicians in the orchestra.
Oh, not up to 150, up to maybe 105
Okay,
for
105.
really
So
big pieces. So think about 90, 95.
yeah, but you think of all the musicians that try to get there, and there's still that few of spots, but there's still
Yeah,
only one conductor. So
right.
even more competitive and more, so like I said, really an unusual character to get to that spot, to
Yeah.
stand on the podium, right?
Yes. I mean, I taught for 33 years in a college, and when the potential flute majors would come in, assessing their drive was absolutely as important as their talent, because it's the drive that makes you willing to put in the work that you
Yes.
have to do to get to that level. And if someone, really loves music, but they sort of have a laid back attitude,
Yeah.
they're not going to make it.
Yeah.
At least not in classical orchestral music. For
Yes.
every
Yes.
audition, um, so I took a couple of auditions. There would be like 105 to 110 applicants for one job.
For one chair.
And and you have 5 minutes to play. And if you're not really on target in the first 30 seconds, they'll just, say, okay, thank you. In other words, we don't want to hear anymore.
Oh, I still remember when my trumpet career ended. I was I was very average and very lackadaisical in high school, and I thought, okay, I brought my trumpet with me to college, and thought, of all the things I'm doing, I'll do this thing, I'll do this, I'll work, I'll do a lot of different things, and I got to the marching band audition, the practice for the marching band for the University of South Carolina, and there was probably, I remember, there's probably about 50 or 60 people blowing horns around me. And I'm just hearing these people warm up. And then, up to a scale, like a place I couldn't go in the high, a place I couldn't go in the low. And I just looked around the room, just put my trumpet back down.
Oh, really?
I can still remember that moment, just looking around and putting my trumpet in the case and closing the locks for the last time. And I don't think I really ever played after that. I mean, I pulled it out and played around or stuff, but that really ended my career. Right? My career, air quotes, my career was over right there. Just seeing how good people had become as you get to the collegiate level. The difference between playing in a high school band and playing for a marching band in a decent college. I mean, but University of South Carolina is not a music school, but it's still a big school. And to be just blown away by the difference in skill and talent. There's now it's combination talent and the willingness to work hard and dedicate yourself to the trade. But I really admire anybody that can make it there and hold it on there. But along the way, your dream of playing got kind of crushed.
Certainly did.
And that's because of character. Yeah, because of characters, right? I mean, people you meet along the way, and somebody entered. What was this? What was it like being a young woman? In a real big industry, right? It's a big industry, and you're a young person, and you've got to have people you look up to, and people you need mentors. And it didn't turn out that way.
Well, it was a very specific relationship. And it was the fact that, just quickly, my family of origin, 2 daughters, my 4-year older sister was brilliant. So, I was never good enough until I discovered the flute. And then I did something that she hadn't done. So when I excelled at it, I sort of felt like I found myself. But that was partly because I studied with a very charismatic teacher.
Okay.
And I met him when I was 13, and I wasn't at all impressed at first. But he was a wonderful teacher, and I became very attached to him. And he was able to give me the support and kind of the interest in me that I never got from my father. So I was very attached to this man. He was my surrogate father. Great. And when my own father forbade me to go to a music school, so he insisted that I go to Emory University in Atlanta, where he taught, where we got free tuition. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah. More and more. But the end of my sophomore year, I got a phone call from the woman who was playing second flute to my teacher, who was first flute, and she said she was leaving and she knew I was good and maybe I'd want to audition. So I called this man, Warren Little, and I said, I'm thinking of auditioning. What do you think? I'd been his student, so I was looking up to him, and he said, well, I don't know. I guess if you want to, sure, why not? So it was the complete lack of enthusiasm that ironically spurred me to say, okay, darn it, I'm going to do it. But when I won the job and then sat next to him that first year before it was so competitive, it was fine. We got along really well. But towards the end of the first year, and especially from the second year, he started muttering insults during rehearsals. And, he was seated 2 feet to my left. So every hour of every rehearsal, I'm right next to my mentor, who's now my tour mentor. And because I had sort of based my assessment of my own abilities on his
Yes.
endorsement, when he withdrew that, it was very, very tough.
Did you have anybody to fill that hole? I mean, because you're in the chair, you earned the chair.
Yeah. No, I really did. I mean, not until quite a bit later. It was lonely. I mean, it did lead right in the middle of my 5 years. So in the middle of the third year, I got so depressed that it led to a suicide attempt.
Oh my God.
And I won't go into, the awful stuff. But one thing I thought I could read is sort of the situation around the timing of that. And even though it's very peculiar because it's somebody in a professional orchestra, but I think anyone who has struggled with depression will really get this. So if that's okay, I will take a sip of water and
then read an excerpt from the book.
Yeah, it's not very long. As winter approached, my depression deepened. I became more and more isolated, avoiding even the briefest interactions with people. My attachment to Dr. Norton, who was a psychiatrist, weakened when he failed to understand the effects of Warren's behavior. Repeated attempts to talk to my roommates simply underscored how little we had in common. And day after day, my former mentor disparaged me. My world shrank until only one thing seemed real: Warren's contempt for me. I was a failure as a flutist. I was a failure, period. One Friday evening in mid-December, I struggled to focus on my part during the first of 3 performances of Robert Shaw's lovely Christmas choral program that featured his extraordinary choir. But I barely made it, so I sort of jumped to the present tense. I'd barely made it through last night's performance, and now I had to get through tonight and then Sunday.
Yeah.
And it was Christmas, which I think is a fraught time for anyone who has family of origin difficulties. Everyone's supposed to be happy. So, and I said, blah, blah, the walls of the hall closed in, squeezing me out. I couldn't stand seeing the happiness of others. I was the loner surrounded by groups, couples and families in the audience, singers together in the choir, friends in the orchestra, but not my friends. Warren had made it clear I didn't belong there. I was a fraud, a pretender. If not in the orchestra, where did I belong? Each note of the shepherd's farewell mocked me. The sound of the strings playing a slow, tender melody reminded me of my first orchestra rehearsal years ago in high school when I had fallen in love with the sound of the orchestra.
Yes.
But tonight, that same beauty hurt. I wanted to run across the stage screaming that I didn't belong, that an imposter was playing the second flute part. And as soon as the last note ended, I slammed my flute into the case, rushed off the stage, and drove recklessly to my apartment. And I then go on and have a suicide attempt. So, yeah, it's, when your world funnels down and the only thing
Yes.
real is something that is really negative, that's when depression gets uh, so deep that it's really hard to manage. And I had been paired with a psychiatrist because I knew I was struggling, but he was in training to be an analyst, and I needed to talk about what was happening in the rehearsals because the man who had been my father figure was sitting next to me. But
Yes.
the psychiatrist said, "Oh, it's because of your father. We need to talk about him." And I just felt more and more um, alienated from
Mm.
therapy because what I was dealing with every day, he didn't get. And my
Yes.
roommates had no interest in classical music. They didn't get it either. So I I felt very alone. And Christmas always heightens those feelings.
Yeah, and it's also there's less light. I mean, there's sunshine. We got darker days. There's a
That's
lot.
right.
There's a lot going on. I think with it's more susceptible time, right? It's emotional
Yes.
time. It's the circadian rhythm is not a great spot. There's less, like I said, less light. How did you come? I mean, because you're looking back now, and you wrote the book as a great reflection and kind of a almost there. I'm sure therapeutic.
Yeah.
How did you get out of that? I mean, I think maybe sometimes for this show, the lesson for people is you got there. You thankfully you're still here.
Right.
Um,
And there were a number of things. First of all, when uh, I hate to be graphic, but I had
yes.
slit one wrist and was about to slit the other. I just
Okay.
had a flood of what ifs. And I thought, what if I maim myself and I can't play, but I'm still around? Or what if, and I kept going, what if, what if? And I
Yeah.
thought,
Oh, I
I
love
do
it.
not want my former teacher to to get this to be this successful in undermining me. He cannot destroy me. So I did get to the hospital, and I was lucky that right after that, several people seated around me in the woodwind section pulled me aside and they said, the problem in the flutes is not you, it is Warren. Can't you see that the better you play, the more he harasses you? And I developed a very deep friendship with a bassoonist. So, um, friendship pulled me out, but so did music. And so did a certain shred of pride in, I can't let this man destroy me.
So powerful. Yeah, I for sure as you were describing it, I was the for me it's quite obvious without you even saying it before was he could hear you and
Oh,
he couldn't hear you. I mean, he couldn't be you. He couldn't play like you. So the only way was to get you out so he could hold his chair. This is weak people in life tear other people down to keep themselves afloat.
well, I I think it was a lot of things. I think first of all, because of the new conductor firing a lot of people, he was under a lot of stress. But of course,
Uh,
me being 20 years younger, I didn't think he'd be under any stress. I felt the stress. But that's when he started um,
yeah.
attacking me in words, verbally. He only made a pass at me one time when we had played a concert. We always go to a bar afterwards,
Yeah.
And he happened to sit beside me at the bar, which was odd because we weren't really speaking at that time. But we sort of had a faux normal conversation. And then he put his arm around me and pulled me to him. And he said, "There's one way your troubles could all go away." And
It's
that,
kind of
you
crazy.
know, that
Well,
was
that's
that was
that's
pretty
so
sleazy.
it's pretty creepy. That's pretty creepy.
It is, but that, that didn't bother me nearly as much as the ongoing barrage of insults. Um,
No, that would be, yeah, that's
I mean,
completely different.
somebody hits on me, okay, that's not a big deal.
Good, yeah,
But
good
when
try.
day after day, uh, this man is really gaslighting me and making me doubt my
Hmm.
perception of reality.
Yes, yeah, and it's good that I mean, I think these are powerful moments when you're really face the real you, when you're at that moment where where you're thinking about taking your own life, and you begin to take your own life,
Yeah.
and the flood of the real you clawing through all the bullshit, all the bad self-talk, right? It's like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of this, monster kicking the door down, not a monster, but like the real Hugh kicking the door down, busting into the room and going, "What's going on in here? This has gone too far." And we got to stop this. The real you came to the surface and rescued you. You
Yeah.
rescued
Yeah.
yourself.
Yes. And I mean, I did have this strong drive to succeed in music, and I
Yes.
really loved it. So at least I could still play beautiful music. But I did eventually leave. And at first, I
Hmm.
just took a year's leave of absence, and I was going to go back because when I tried to take, not tried, when I took auditions for other professional orchestras, I'd
Okay.
start out okay. And then these old tapes of what my tour mentor, had been saying for years would play in my head. And, I just wasn't um, emotionally
Hmm.
confident enough to be a good auditioner. Now, auditioning for a college teaching job, that's very different
A
because you
different
talk to
story. Yeah.
people. You
Yeah. Yeah.
have a couple of days, you get to know, but
Yeah.
an orchestra audition, 5 minutes, and
Yeah. Oh,
it's
probably
very cutthroat.
20 seconds before they've actually already made up their mind.
And yeah, in many cases, yes.
And many. I I just when I was on a call earlier, and we closed it with kind of some different say memories and ideas and phrases, and the final one of the final phrases was things, why does this happen to me?
Mm.
We talked about the evolution of why did that happen to me, and then the realization that things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And
Well,
yeah, I'm hard to move off this one, but I'm open. I'm open to the conversation, and I've taken it to another. I kind of want to say to another level, but I've evolved in my own way. That I don't think things happen to us. I think they and maybe for us and even through us. And often it's not for us, it's also for other people, for us to pass that lesson on, or to show people how we went through something so they can take away the lesson. So it happened to us, yes, in a way, but it happened for us. And then ultimately for other people to see, or to us to pass that lesson on. So if you look back, so it's a long kind of background. If you look back, what happened to you?
well, I can
What's the for you
honestly,
part? Yeah,
I
kind
can
of on
honestly
reflection.
Okay. Um, and towards the end of this book, shameless self promotion,
Ah, okay,
uh,
okay.
I reflect on the fact
Hmm,
that really Warren did me a favor because I
yes.
discovered a second calling in teaching. And I really loved my job. And a lot of my students are still good friends. In fact, I had this book release party 2 weeks ago, and I got this nice bouquet of flowers from students that graduated in the mid 80s. So they are towards the end of their
Wow.
careers now. And it's meant a lot to me. Plus, I would not have met my husband, and I wouldn't have our wonderful son. So, I'm very happy with how it turned out. In terms of somebody was using me for the greater good, I'm not sure I can buy that. I think
Yeah.
that the individual can make the trauma into a positive thing,
Yes.
but whether the
Yes.
trauma was visited
Ah.
upon them so that they would learn from it, I'm sorry, I just disagree.
Yeah, I don't know that it's visited. Yeah, and I don't like. Is it part of a grand scheme? I don't. I think it's just the. I was speaking more not that it's some divine intervention, but more that it's just how we deal with the things in life, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It doesn't happen to us, this wasn't meant to be a purposeful like someone's being the architect of this whole
yeah,
of this, and that you're supposed to learn a lesson because obviously there's a million outcomes with what you could do with that lesson. You could have succeeded that night. You could have never done it. There's a million outcomes with what could have happened with what and those are all your choices, how you ended up. And it is, I think were you a different person with your students? And, you must have been a completely different human after that. And being a teacher is also being a conductor in a way. You
yeah.
demand perfection because people are going for 100%. You've got a classroom, you've got to control it, you got to lead it. There's rehearsals or the practice, they graduate. A little bit different story at the end, but it would make you a different professor, I would imagine, than you would have been without that lesson.
That I think that's true. I think also my experience with my teacher made me
Yeah.
super aware of how you can say something that's very hurtful without thinking, you know, and that
Mm,
relationship teacher student is um,
yes.
very important. And almost always, the teacher is more important to the student than the student is to the teacher.
Absolutely.
Although I feel like that wasn't true. I got as much from my students as I gave to them.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think I was a better teacher because I'd had to sort of fight my
Mhm.
way through some things.
Yeah, and you understand the chair a lot different. You have a much different perspective of the chair, the importance of the chair, the power of like you said, the words you might use, and both ways, right? And I think for
Right.
you, I would guess that you were on the positive end of that leverage, not the negative end, and that's so you. This kind of helps me with my idea, which is it happens through you, it happens for you, through you, and the benefactors of all of that were the probably thousands of students that you ended up
Well,
touching.
that's a bit exaggerated because at any one time there would be maybe at the most 20 flute majors, and that's over four
Yeah,
years. Though I haven't
yeah,
stopped to add it up. But anyway, it's a lot of wonderful people.
Mo-
And what I got
yeah,
from them was an appreciation of what a supportive parent does when a student has a musical interest. And these parents would
mm,
would come. I had a student from Hawaii. Her parents came for her recitals and even her orchestra
so cool.
concerts. And they were so supportive. Plus, when my students would take an audition and not get it, they'd be much more philosophical than I ever was. Well, I didn't get this one, but I can take others, which of course I wanted them to feel that way, but I thought, wow, wish I'd been like that.
Oh yeah, I wish I'd been that accepting. Well, you also had some individual dynamics, right, with your dad and your sister, and
Yeah,
so for you to win was important. For you to win was important.
right.
And
Yeah.
let's face it, this generation now, the millennials and the Gen Z are in a much more holistic, awakened space.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
They don't determine their life from the time they're, freshmen in college or even
yeah.
earlier, and then pursue it, and that's it. Now, my son is on his third graduate degree, so yeah, they're free to pursue, and that's good. That is really good. That they're they're not driven by money, power, prestige,
Yeah, yeah,
or at least a greater percentage of them are not than was
yeah, yeah.
true. And I think a couple of generations before that.
Who's your most famous student?
Well,
You-
the one I'm closest to
Okay,
is
yeah.
a
Tell us
tenured.
about one of your
Okay,
students.
she was one of my earliest students. In fact, was one of the ones who sent the flowers, and
Okay.
she is a tenured professor at the University of North Texas. But I hate to even single out a student because I have so many that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am so grateful to. But she went on to be a college professor at a very good music school. But I'm just as proud of others, some of whom went on to be lawyers or
So interesting.
musicologists or music librarians. Um, they're all very dear to me.
Yeah, that always, I mean, being a teacher is just fascinating to me because you do end up with students that just go do so many different things. And these
Yeah.
are people that you touch. And I think to have to being around young people is also kind of cool.
Oh, it sure is. Right. It keeps you young, I think.
Yeah. I I have a couple of interns. I'm managing about four interns right now with this show. And
Great.
and yeah, they help me with the post production and posting and kind of organizing files and moving stuff around. And it's fantastic to have conversations with college kids. We get online,
Yeah.
we do Zoom calls and talk about the work, and
Right.
and then a little bit about what's going on in school. How's the degree? How's the graduation going?
Hmm.
What's the job stuff look like? Do you need help with this? Do you need help with your CV, or talk about career? What are you going to do? Back to school, off to work. And it just every time I finish a call, I got good hope for that. The next day, good hope for the country, the world. Because the generation's great. We
Right.
got
I
great.
think
We're gonna
so
be
too.
we're gonna be in great hands.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. That's probably
Yeah,
a good note, so to speak, to end on. A high
yeah, it
note.
is. Yeah, it is. It is a high note. It's and I think that we kind of give them, they get a bad rap at times on certain angles. They get a bad rap. And if you read the news, right, if you read the news about the younger generation, and I'm sure your parents looked at you as a younger generation and thought, oh my gosh, the world's going to go to hell. And it always seems to work out. We always seem to kind of, no matter how dark stuff looks. And I think this is same with personal lives. No matter how rough we think things are, it always works out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's never as bad as it seems.
That's, again, a very positive note to end on.
Yeah. I mean, Ernestine, interesting. How do people find your book? And
Well,
maybe hold it up again. Give us a title again.
okay. It's called Counter Melodies.
Melodies. Great name.
It's not straight there.
Yeah. Yeah. Great
And
name.
it's on Amazon, Barnes
Mhm.
and Noble. I think even Target can order it.
Wow. Wow.
So it's out there. It has made the finals in an award and has won the memoir section of another award. So it's pretty good.
That's got to feel wonderful to be able to
Yeah.
get your memoirs down and then have it recognized as well.
Yeah. And oddly, I think a lot of memoirists sort of work out their angst with one or both of their parents. But for me, it was my teacher, because I was in a yoga class where at the end of every class, he would say, "I am grateful to my teacher." And I tense up and I think, I am not grateful to my teacher. And that's why I wrote the book, because I realized, wow, that was a long time ago, but I still have mixed feelings, the best of times,
Can't
the
let it go,
worst
right?
of times.
Yeah.
And this man really made me who I am, but he almost destroyed me also.
In the end, are you grateful for the encounter?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I say, I would not be who I am if I hadn't had a really good teacher, and he was a very good teacher. And there was nothing inappropriate. He just liked teaching. It was being his colleague that didn't go over so well.
I love that part. Oh,
In fact,
yeah. Sorry, go
well,
ahead.
one rather dramatic story, a piece that had second flute solos, which are kind of rare. And right before one of them on a concert, he whipped out a switchblade knife and pushed the button so it ended up about an inch from my upper left arm. And he wasn't going to use it. He was just trying to rattle me to get me so I'd mess up the solo. But I remember thinking in the split second before I played, I thought, God, that can't be a switchblade knife. Surely even he wouldn't do that. But he would, and he did. And that's probably a good story.
I kind of like this guy. He is a savage.
Yeah, he was pretty creative.
I actually, that story right there just kind of made me fall in love with him. I mean, he might have been the baddest guy in the play, but that's a savage move to do in the orchestra. Oh, hats off to this guy.
Well,
boy, he must have had some stories. Boy,
and
he must have had some stories.
later, when I told a very famous flutist said, "Well, that's one way to cut the old umbilical cord," which I thought was just perfect.
Beautiful analogy.
Yeah.
Beautiful analogy. Ernestine, it's a pleasure to hear your story and a pleasure to meet you. Fantastic journey.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, fantastic journey. And I think, for listeners, thanks for everybody for listening, supporting mental health today. And you never know, what people are going through, no matter how successful they look. And I think, Ernestine, your story is absolutely that. Somebody who gets their dream, reaches for the ring, grabs the ring, and young age, sitting in that chair, and everything, your life would look perfect to millions of young flutists. They would be jealous, and to know that you, like you said, ran out of a Christmas performance, and end up in such a dark place. That you never know. And so always remember, just, you don't know what people are going through, and always just have a kind word for people and be supportive of people, and reach out. When you're in a dark place, reach out, because someone else is you'll find somebody else's hand.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that message. So important.
Really important. Reach out. There's always help. So you're not, I think the biggest thing is you're never alone. You may feel alone, and it may seem like you're alone, but you're definitely not. Can't believe we've been talking for 50 minutes. Holy cow, Ernestine, this is wild. That's so good. Time flies. Thanks again so much. Hang around for 20 seconds on the other side, and I got a little closeout. And again, thanks everybody for listening to Mental Health Today. If you are catching us on the audio version, just drop down and leave a short note and a little message. Otherwise, you can find Christine's book and Christine on Amazon.
But
Thanks
it's
very much.
Ernestine.
I'm sorry, Christine. Ernestine. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. Find Ernestine Whitman's book on Amazon. Thanks. I'll see you in 20 seconds.
Sure.
Yeah, loose, baby.
But we're about to go and make this vessel with these great professionals at Public Glass. We're not part of the community, but we're from the outer family of glassblowing. Yeah, we're gonna go make a magical giant jar with optic lenses so that if you turn it, it changes all the time. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.